Peering over the banister, Aditya squinted into the murky water below, hoping against hope that the floodwaters had receded overnight. But something caught his attention, a dark, indistinct shape floating in the water. He leaned closer, heart racing, trying to make out what it was. "What is that?" he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible in the eerie silence of the flooded house. The object was large, sluggishly drifting just beneath the water's surface. Then, in the faint morning light, the truth revealed itself. Its skin was smooth, glistening, and unmistakably scaly. A sudden chill ran down his spine as realization hit him. It was a snake, massive, easily stretching several feet long. And worse, something bulged grotesquely from its midsection. Aditya's stomach churned as he understood what he was seeing. The snake had swallowed something large enough to create a visible lump in its body. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. The sky had been a constant sheet of gray for days, and today was no exception. He left work early after the alert, an official warning about the nearby bridge closing. The floods were getting worse. His priority now was reaching home before the river spilled over. As he turned onto his street, his heart sank. The road outside his house had turned into a shallow river. Water swirled around submerged streetlights and drifting debris, making everything look eerie. His SUV cut through the floodwaters with relative ease, but the sight of his house, surrounded by rising water, was unsettling. He parked and stepped out into knee-deep water. The cold of it bit through his trousers as he waded toward the front door, feeling the weight of the situation. Inside, the scene was grim. His grandfather, old but stubbornly independent, was struggling to haul furniture toward the staircase. "The water's coming in," his grandfather grunted. Aditya joined him, casting a glance at the rising pool. Together, they started moving furniture upstairs, working urgently. Time was short, and every second counted. After hours of labor, they managed to move everything important to the upper floor. Exhausted, they sat down for dinner. His grandfather had prepared food earlier, and they ate in silence, rain hammering the roof. Flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls. Despite everything, they allowed themselves a moment of relief, hoping the water would recede by morning. But the storm was unrelenting. Aditya couldn't sleep. The air was thick with humidity. Rain hammered the roof, and the storm tore at the aluminum sheets above. Sharp screeches cut through the night as pieces were ripped away, letting water pour in. Then the alarm started. The water had reached Aditya's SUV, triggering the alarm. It wailed through the night and didn't stop. Soon other vehicles joined in, their alarms adding to the chaos. The noise, combined with the storm, made rest impossible. Aditya lay awake, exhausted. The storm, the rattling roof, and the constant alarms felt like an assault. Every time one stopped, another began. The night dragged on endlessly. Water continued creeping upward, the air stifling, the house groaning under the pressure. By morning, Aditya hadn't slept at all. He forced himself up and stepped cautiously to the stairs. The ground floor was still submerged. His SUV's headlights flickered weakly through the water. The alarms had finally stopped, but the damage was done. The murky water swirled with debris, now only a few feet from the upper floor. His stomach clenched. Everything below was gone. Panic threatened, but he pushed it aside. They had to survive. "Grandpa, we need to figure out our supplies," Aditya said, moving toward the food they'd saved. His grandfather, frail and shivering, stared blankly at the rain. "We don't have much left." Aditya inventoried what remained. Rice, flour, lentils, and beans. It wasn't much. "We'll have to ration this, or it won't last more than a couple of days." They divided it into tiny portions. Hunger would be constant. Worse, the well water was polluted. They had only a few bottles left. Aditya climbed onto the roof and adjusted an old pipe to collect rainwater. When the first trickle began, he felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. They could drink this, for now. But the storm wouldn't stop. The rain pounded relentlessly. His grandfather's condition worsened. The fever grew, and he spent his days wrapped in salvaged blankets, murmuring softly. They heard the low thrum of a boat engine. Through the sheets of rain, an army boat appeared, soldiers leaning over the sides, scanning the area. The army was still out there, rescuing those they could. He just hoped they'd be next. The army had a system, a priority. People whose houses had been completely destroyed were rescued first. Aditya understood that. It was only fair. But every time a boat passed by without stopping, his hope dwindled. Their house was still standing after all, even if it was half underwater. In the house, the floodwaters had risen to the top step of the staircase. Aditya and his grandfather sat in silence, listening to the rain. His grandfather's fever had spiked again, and he was muttering about how the world was ending. Aditya had heard it all before. The stories of the great floods from his childhood, the end of days, how the rivers would reclaim the land. Meanwhile, Aditya continued to check the water levels, praying they wouldn't rise any higher. In a desperate attempt to contact the outside world, Aditya rigged a makeshift dynamo from the ceiling fan, manually spinning the blades to generate just enough power to send a brief message to his mother. They were alive. With floodwaters still rising, Aditya tried fishing from the balcony of their villa using flour as bait, hoping to catch something. Instead, small snakes nibbled at the line. At first, the sight startled them, but then he and his grandfather burst into laughter. The river had invaded their lives, along with its creatures. Days blurred into hunger, exhaustion, and waiting. Helicopters passed overhead, occasionally airlifting people out, but never them. Each time they rushed out, waving, yelling, only to be overlooked. Their mostly intact home didn't seem urgent enough. One night, restless and unable to sleep, Aditya rose to check the water level. He heard something, soft, slow, like something moving beneath the water. Peering into the dark stairwell, he caught a glimpse of movement, not debris, something alive. He grabbed a flashlight, heart racing. What he saw made his blood run cold. A massive snake, its body coiled in the floodwater, scales gleaming in the faint light. It must have entered with the flood, but something was wrong. It was stuck, its belly grotesquely swollen. Aditya woke his grandfather, who stared in horror. "What could it have eaten?" he whispered. Aditya didn't reply. The snake barely moved, but its presence was terrifying. Trapped inside with them, it blocked their only way out. The storm had calmed to a drizzle, but inside, the tension was suffocating. Helicopters continued flying overhead. Aditya stood on the terrace, waving a red cloth, shouting until his voice cracked. But no one saw them. Feverish and weak, he slumped against the terrace railing. His grandfather had managed to find some antibiotics in an old cabinet. They took them, and the symptoms eased, but food was running out. All they had left were scraps, thin rice porridge, salt, and a few pickled mangoes. They rationed it carefully, each meal smaller than the last. Aditya tried the fan dynamo again. He managed a faint charge, but there was no signal, no messages, no update. The sense of isolation grew heavier by the hour. The heat and humidity pressed in. Aditya couldn't stop glancing at the stairs, listening for any splash. The snake was still, mostly submerged, but its occasional movement sent chills through him. He knew it was unlikely to reach them. Its bloated body couldn't climb, but the image haunted him. The thought of it slithering up, rising from the water, its head breaching the top step, was unbearable. Exhausted, Aditya sat on the cool tile floor, back against the wall, watching and waiting. The house, once a place of safety, had become a trap. A cage shared with a monstrous intruder. With dwindling food, no communication, and the ever-present snake below, each hour felt like a battle against fear itself. Every creak of the house and splash of water seemed louder now that the rain had eased. Aditya's mind wandered, counting seconds between raindrops, the nails in the ceiling beams, anything to keep hopelessness at bay. Time blurred. Occasionally, he stood at the window, staring at the flooded landscape, still and silent. Then the villa began to groan. He could feel subtle shifts beneath him. Cracks spread across the walls, rain having seeped into every crevice. The house wouldn't hold forever. With desperation setting in, Aditya considered a reckless idea. Food and water were low, and to make things worse, a giant snake had made its way into their home. His grandfather couldn't swim, and if the house collapsed or the snake moved closer, they'd have no chance. Grabbing a broken furniture leg, Aditya took a deep breath and descended the stairs. Through the murky water, he could barely make out the snake. He heard it, though, its shifting, splashing presence. The memory of its massive body and the strange bulge in its belly unnerved him, but frustration and fatigue pushed him forward. He prodded the water where he thought the snake lay. Suddenly, the snake's head burst from the surface, jaws slightly open, hissing. Aditya stumbled back in panic and scrambled up the stairs. The snake thrashed, then stilled again, head just above water. Aditya slumped against the wall, breath ragged. Moving, it was futile. He could only wait. His grandfather, watching from above, muttered, "Best leave it be." Hours passed. Plaster began falling from the ceiling, the house groaning under its own weight. Aditya kept glancing at his grandfather, haunted by the thought of what could happen if the structure failed. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a boat engine. Aditya rushed to the terrace, waving a red cloth and shouting until his voice cracked. A boat carrying soldiers approached. "We're here, just the two of us," Aditya called down. "The water's going to start draining soon. We'll return to get you. Just wait, an hour or two," the soldier replied. Aditya felt some relief, briefly. "There's a snake in the house," he yelled. "A massive one. It swallowed something and got stuck." The soldiers exchanged glances. "Do you know what it swallowed?" "No idea," Aditya replied. "But it's huge." They radioed for instructions. An hour later, the water finally began to recede. The snake came into view, its swollen body pinned under a table. When the army returned, they brought a veterinarian and a doctor. The snake, motionless, was quickly assessed. The vet sedated it and began to operate. Aditya and his grandfather stood nearby, tense as the contents of the snake's belly were slowly revealed. Finally, the vet pulled something out, a soggy, oversized teddy bear. Its fur clung to the gloves, soaked but intact. The sight was so absurd that Aditya laughed. His grandfather chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. The snake had mistaken the plush toy for prey. The veterinarian stitched the snake up and explained it would recover fully. The storm had caused chaos, but this small, strange relief softened the edge of it. Aditya turned to his grandfather, still smiling. "Well, at least we don't have to worry about the snake anymore." His grandfather nodded, a rare peace on his face. The tension that had hung over them was finally lifting. The army promised to return shortly and take them to safety. For now, they waited, the worst behind them. The skies cleared. The floodwaters receded. The house, though battered, was still standing. The storm was finally over. The snake was gone. And as sunlight broke through the clouds, Aditya stood with his grandfather, the weight of the past days slowly beginning to lift.